I chose mine on budgets and high school sports. I was kind of debating how specific to get on that and which direction to go with that, but that can be an issue in many different directions. Budgets that go to high school sports, it's becoming increasingly more expensive for athletes, regardless of the sport. So here's a kind of, did you know, all athletics becoming year-round. I mean, more and more athletics are becoming year-round. Off-season training, trips, increased demand for safer equipment, cost for staying safe and relevant, meaning you want to be competitive. It's on the rise, and this isn't just for Iowa schools. I mean, it might be different for Iowa schools. This is just one kind of research that I found. Study 30,000, 50,000 for a program. This is based on like a football program, I think, is what they're going off of. But it shows that it can be pretty expensive just to run a program, and obviously some programs get more than others. So where's the money coming from? When it comes to spending money on the supplies, equipment for sports, high schools get significantly more. Some get more than others, of course. District uses tax dollars to pay for facilities mostly, and most coaches, but the head coach has to come up with the vast majority of the cost to fund the program. And this might differ from state to state and school to school, but it's probably becoming more increasingly where coaches and communities are coming up with funds, generous communities. So, and continued. One interview or one article I found, the coach was saying, his profession has changed. He's not only a teacher and coach, he's also a fundraiser. And like I was saying earlier, it takes quite a bit, maybe $30,000 to $50,000 a year to stay safe and relevant. Just to outfit a kid, one kid could cost between $400 and $500. When I went to high school, I played every sport. Funding didn't seem like an issue, but of course I didn't, know what was going on behind the scenes. But my parents didn't have to pay anything out of pocket for me to play the sports. And who knows, maybe there was funding or community funding or donations by some wealthy people to make sure we had uniforms and things like that. So expectations these days, head coaches from all sports are expected to bring in money from their communities, via auctions, sponsorships, letters, etc. And without the fundraising, equipment wouldn't be safe, uniforms would be out of date, and the program wouldn't survive. And a lot of programs are pay for play, which probably eliminates quite a few people, quite a few students. So cuts in education begin to mount. Many schools are instituting a pay-to-play system where athletes have to pay a fee to participate. The fees are usually only enough to cover coaches' stipends, not all the equipment needed to keep an athletic team going. So trying to get kids to raise $300 a piece is a burden on the parents, and that is where boosters come in. So everybody kind of knows what a booster is. Booster clubs have been around for decades. Non-profit organizations that have a host of members who volunteer to hit the streets and ask for money. Once again, something I've never really, I know that you have to raise money. We used to have a pop scrimmage, I think it was called. You'd bring in a pop, or there were donations from people in the community, but some communities need boosters, some don't. But I don't know how Dowling, like for instance, there's a Dowling Catholic, I don't know, that's probably all funded by, that isn't funded by state because it's private, right? I mean, so I'm assuming. So the funding is different for depending on what school you're at, what district, how much community involvement you have. There's no training, coaches aren't fundraising powerhouses. They don't go into it being that kind of person. They just learn from the mistakes and try to get better each time. Many coaches don't see the situation getting any better. They think that we'll have to continue to raise more money. It's sad, but it's the reality of it. And does it matter? I guess, does it matter that, you know, they have to come up, the fundraising is getting harder? Does it matter that athletics might go away? I mean, some communities might have to get rid of it. Does it really matter to a student's education? I mean, some people think that sports, there's nothing to really be learned there. Some people think that mixing education with sports, there's no place in it. But then coaches, a lot of coaches will argue that there's a lot to be learned in sports. So whether it's football or girls basketball, there are many lessons you can learn through activities in sports: perseverance, committing to something, following through when something doesn't go well, or handling success when things are going well. To me, sports is the only way to get some of these kids' attention. You know, if there wasn't sports, then that's kind of like their way of, coaches can relate to them in a way, and they can relate the material maybe, or at least get the kid to listen to them, whereas a regular classroom teacher might not be able to relate to a student at all. So some schools putting the kibosh. Some high schools across the U.S. have reported that the recession has led to financial difficulties for extracurricular programs. And some schools have started trimming compensation for coaches, eliminating transportation, adding or increasing athletic fees, or cutting back on night games to save on electricity, or just eliminating sports altogether. So many think that top-tier athletes would be okay because they would find a better funded school or join a club. But the average athlete will miss out on the collegiality and sense of belonging that a team or club can provide. So pros, I mean, of course, there's a lot of pros for keeping athletics, health benefits. Studies have looked at the correlation between rising rates of obesity and declining funding for physical activity. Social benefits. Girls who compete in sports get better grades, graduate at higher rates, and have more confidence. The vast majority avoid drugs, unplanned pregnancy, obesity, depression, and suicide. So these are just a few things that I found in some of the research. Emotional benefits, improved mental and well-being for adolescents. And some more advantages: weight control, problem-solving skills, self-esteem, social competence, academic achievement, and reduced rates of juvenile arrest and school dropouts. I mean, I think the pros are pretty obvious, but I mean, when you're thinking about budgets, and the first thing to go seems to be athletics, but you know, or extracurriculars. But of course, it's expensive. Some believe that the problem with mixing sports with academics is that the message it sends is dishonest and shapes kids' priorities. They might think that, you know, they don't have to like a math class, and or a science class, and there's a way out, or they can go this path, you know. So that's what one person wrote. And, reduced overall health benefits, that's obvious. And then another quote: unfortunately, someday sports will be out there for people who have money. We can say we will take care of those without money, but I can tell you it will be the kids with talent. The average kid is going to get left behind. The whole developmental factor, they're going to miss out. So that would be pretty sad if it got to that point where the average kid couldn't participate in sports because of money. I mean, think of all the benefits that come from just participation in sports. Self-esteem, the belonging, the meeting, you know, the relationships that are developed. So my opinion, I personally believe that sports are very important in school. When we as teachers talk about diversifying our lesson plans or different learners, sports are a great example. They can be a good way to relate material. A student might be able to understand a coach and his delivery method better than others. Sports help teachers relate to students and get them to listen. For many students, if it wasn't for sports, they wouldn't have a chance. I mean, this is opinion, of course. This may be the only way to reach some students. if administrators think that they have to cut phys ed to get better test scores, then they are probably heading down the wrong path. They need to look at the big picture and realize how many benefits there are to physical activity, and then test scores will follow. Sometimes I use that with students that I know are athletes when I'm subbing, and they're not paying attention. I'll ask them. I'll say, "Hey, what would your coach say right now?" So if I go tell your coach, what's he going to say? And it's funny how they just change their tone right away. I'm like, you realize you might not be playing if you don't get this done. And then it's funny how it flips them. So I mean, I think sports have always been a good motivator to. My teacher told me that when I was in 7th grade. They're like, if you stay out for sports, you're more likely to get better grades. You're more likely to, just all the benefits that I'm kind of mentioning now. But I kind of believe in that. It kind of keeps some of these kids that wouldn't have, if there wasn't for sports, they wouldn't have a motivation to succeed in school. Some of them, not all, but some. So that would be it. These are my resources, I guess. So the board, guys.
Yeah, that's great.
Do you happen to know, what the percentage of schools that completely fund a sporting, I don't know what to call it, let's just say sports, completely fund the sports in their school?
I would say it's mostly the private schools. I think a lot of the times the facilities and things are funded, but not the uniforms, the equipment. I think that has.
So most public school students have to pay. I wasn't.
That's what every student that I've spoke to, like in the Des Moines area, like when I'm doing, when I talk to high school kids doing driver's ed or whatever, because I do driver's ed, but they tell me, yeah, we have to pay this, and this is what our cost to go out for football, and I'm like, wow, I never had to pay anything.
And that's
back
for
then.
uniform,
And then,
cleats.
yeah, they have to pay for fees for uniforms, usage, things like that. And I'm thinking, that's why you're not going out for 3 or 4 sports. You're only going out for 1 or 2 because your parents are making you choose because they're having to come up with this money out of pocket. Whereas you never used to have to do that, or at least in where I was from, small town, rural area. But maybe there was some rich farmer who was putting money into the program, buying this that I didn't know about. But yeah, our families.
That was my reason, is I was kind of rural on the outskirts of Newton, and I would have had to have a car, be able to pay for a car to drive into town, go play sports, pay for my equipment, and then come back home late at night just by myself. That's hard. But.
Do you have any ideas I'm looking at all the benefits of sports. There's really kind of benefits of being active.
Right.
And I understand the idea of having teams and being competitive, because that's part of what makes sports so interesting. But if the benefits are kind of the health benefit of staying active, is there another way to put that into the curriculum without it having to be, you have to be on football team? You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
yeah, just phys ed in general, because I think when there's budget cuts, they cut these extra phys ed, they cut, what are they called, they're not the base classes like math, science, and that, what are they called?
Electives.
The electives or whatever.
Extracurriculars.
Yeah, the extracurriculars, and those are the first things that go, unfortunately. But if you actually look at the big picture and how important that the phys ed and physical activity plays in your whole life in general, that's just my opinion, but your mood enhances, your thought process enhances by staying active, just everything. Their grades improve. If you actually did a test on that and see how their grades are improved just from being active and working with other students and the group where, just the team aspect, the belonging, the overall happiness, it's amazing. But those are opinions, and to get lawmakers to agree on that, when it comes down to money and budgets, it's difficult to, you got a choice, comes down to 2 things. It's easy to make this choice, cut this because it's cost. Well, it's not one of the main things, so. And then as a society, what do we value? Ask yourself those questions. A lot of people, flip-flop on that. But. Oh, Right when I started, I'm sitting there
I got off my computer when he was in here too, so.
I know.
Don't
worry about it.
like me going,
I wrote on my review that I'm terrible at this too about reading.
Yeah. I know.
With factual stuff, it's so hard not to read some of the stuff because I don't want to get things wrong, but